So last time I was thinking about the unproven medical theory termed lack of insight. It didn't even make it into the psychiatric's diagnostic manual before it simply catapulted up to being enshrined into national law. And the science behind it, I, I could call it juvenile, but that would be doing it a favor. It in no way approximates anything that's called evidence based medicine or has anything behind it that would hold up scrutiny in an eighth grade science class as far as the scientific method. And this is a similarity between us and the Nazi regime, the willingness to base national laws that affect people's lives, their very lives, based upon unproven medical theories. Okay, so to move back on specifically to Judge Gorsuch, uh, to sum up more of the things that he completely misses, again, he misses no proof for chemical imbalance, no proof about genetics being the cause of mental problems. He completely misses the blurring of the lines between competent versus incompetent by the introduction of this concept of lack of insight, which I do believe was already in some states by the time he wrote his book. This is very important because he spends a lot of time saying, well, if they're competent, it's this way, but if they're incompetent, it's that way. But those lines are practically completely erased, I think, through lack of insight. Um, Completely misses the onset of the politicization of mental treatment. Everyone saw this election cycle, the way that the different candidates called each other, accused each other of mental problems. Donald Trump may be impeached, suggestions that he be impeached because of mental problems. I've talked about in another video the psychologists getting together and coming up with the manifesto against Trumpism, trying to make this into a recognized mental problem that is a danger to not only the United States but to the entire world. These things are not a joke. They're very dangerous. I think the statistics are well over 80% of psychologists are liberal Democrats, well over 90% of psychiatrists are atheists. So you have a definite slant there, and I'm amazed that the conservative movement is not concerned about giving so much power to people who find the conservative viewpoints to be an expression of mental illness. Um, Gorsuch completely skips over the gag orders for forced drugging and forced treatment, the increase of gag orders that have been issued. He doesn't even have a clue as he goes through the history of physician assisted suicide in Holland. He completely skips over the free speech issues. Let me go into that with a little depth. It seems to me, and I say this with all sincerity, that when I'm looking at case by case of the people coming out of the Netherlands, one of the things I'm particularly seeing is the desire of people to not twinkle off into the night all by themselves in the privacy of their own home, in their own bedrooms or whatever, because they specifically wish for physician assisted suicide so that they can bring attention to their particular illness. They want to say to the world, look how much this illness is causing me to suffer. I don't want anyone else to suffer like this. Please put forward, funds, effort, whatever, research into this horrific illness which has attacked me. I definitely see a number of people taking physician assisted suicide for that very reason, to have a public record of why it is that they felt that they could no longer hang on. Now, that is a free speech issue. Do they have the right to speak to us through that manner? I think that needs to be considered. And then he does take into account the free speech involved with what he calls old-fashioned traditional suicide. It's just you with your rope in your garage or your gun or whatever. Um, I think this is very important as the years go by and medical corruption increases, and the ability for the government to simply shut down people who are endlessly complaining about medical corruption, like me, to force drug us, to shut up, to be numb, to be artificially happy about our situation. And if that doesn't work, to simply lock us up in mental institutions at the risk of losing memory through, electroshock, etc. Um, I've talked about the onset of the second Civil War, and I think one of the things is as we fight what is happening in this country, the loss of our freedoms, one step short of picking up a gun and going out and killing someone else is to pick up a gun and kill oneself. I would not at all be surprised if we looked at the first Civil War and found a spike in suicides before that war started. Whatever it is that causes people to be miserable enough to pick up a gun and fight is probably a force that is miserable enough to cause a certain number of people to commit suicide. I think we really need to look at this issue because you can see it starting to build. For instance, we had a lady run into the White House gates with her kid who was shot to death, and in an apparent act of wanting to commit suicide. Who knows what she was trying to communicate or what agony was in her heart that that running into the White House gates was the expression of that. We had a guy set himself on fire on the White House lawn or whatever, and who knows again what agony he was experiencing that he was attempting to communicate. We had I've seen other people set themselves on fire in front of a governor's mansion or something. We had the guy with the one-man helicopter go onto the White House or whatever lawn, or the Capitol lawn or whatever. He would have been shot full of holes if he had been. We would have probably heard that he was just a mentally ill person, nothing to see here, folks, move along. But he lived, and he was able to explain that he made that gesture that was possibly a suicidal, could have ended in his death for sure. He made that gesture to protest campaign finance. So we see more and more of this suicide as a free speech issue. Gorsuch never touches it. He never connects suicide to the medical context, the increasing corruption, as I said, as a way to speak out against this horrific corruption that is making us the walking dead. Also, it's important to realize when one walks into a doctor's office, for instance, me with a long-term undiagnosed illness, and the doctor says, well, you're working, you look okay to me. How badly is this hurting you? And you say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 9. And he says, well, you look pretty happy, you're smiling, it can't hurt too bad. So you say, well, doctor, I hurt so much that I'm willing to kill myself. Well, you see, now the way that the society is and the way that the laws are, that can simply divert you instantly into the mental health track. Notice that it does not divert you instantly into some kind of program where the government is putting money into finding your undiagnosed illness. No, the decision is not to put money into that. The decision has been made to put money into the end stage of the effects of your long-standing undiagnosed illness. So we skip the research. The money doesn't go for that. The money doesn't go for improving diagnostic systems. The money goes towards putting a Band-Aid on your pain and agony at the end of the torturous 40 years that you've lived in America and you haven't been able to get a lousy diagnosis. The problem with the courts upholding that kind of easy seizure, easy forced drugging, is that it means that the system is never forced to improve medicine. Because I'll no longer be in that doctor's office saying, I feel bad, I feel bad. You get drugged to the point that you shut up, or you get locked away. This business of making sadness the enemy, not sickness, is very problematic to the future of the society, because most people will be easily treated. We'll keep with research till we get the big diseases that are really bothering people. That's why we're hunting down cancer. But there are all kinds of diseases that affect 4 million people, 2 million people, 500 people. God forbid if you're one of these people with a rare disease that affects 50 people in America, you're out of luck. These people, I think, their free speech about their agony will simply be immediately suppressed. I think we've come to the point where we are a cold enough society right now where what we're going to do is simply lock these people away in institutions. We already have the laws already set up for this. You don't need to be mentally ill to be locked into an institution. You just need to be a person who's unable to take care of yourself. So I think all of this suppression of needing to express how upset you are with the society, that you haven't been helped, that no one cares for you, that you're sick with no answers, fearing on one side, being forced drugged, being locked away, etc. All this, I think, increases the agony, increases the anxiety, and I would not at all be surprised if we see it leads to an increase in suicide. So I'm looking for a judge who is willing to grapple with medical constitutional rights, because we will be dealing with big changes almost instantly within the very few next years. Compliance drugs, disruptor technology. Yes, it sounds as bad as it sounds. It could be just that bad. Unlimited numbers of people being forced drugged. Well, it's unlimited because when you force drug people in an outpatient setting, you have no space limitations. You have no bed limitations in facilities. You can drug as many people as you want. Huge percentages of people on psych drugs. I just saw 20% of kids are on psych drugs. So of the court's unwillingness to stand up for the constitutional rights of those who are being forced into these psychiatric answers is really causing the country to not push forward with new, more voluntary, less invasive methods of addressing mental distress. The old ways of brute force and what is effectively criminalization of emotional distress, along with what the UN has labeled torture, forced psychiatric treatment, allowing that to continue and now exponentially to increase through national forced drugging, the courts allowing that to continue, not standing up for our constitutional rights. This is setting us backwards. It's a very, I think, unpatriotic thing for judges to do, to simply sign off and rubber stamp these easy seizures and easy forced treatments, because it means it just allows the country to not go forward to the better, more constitutional solutions.